What's really the best part is when you meet someone who is having this awakening to the Constitution as it's written and the realization of all the freedoms and fortune they've been denied by the ever-growing Washington bureaucracies. It's fascinating. If you took any kind of business courses in college, you studied a phrase, opportunity cost. That is, if you buy product A instead of product B, the opportunity cost was the purchase price of product B, which you instead purchased product A. When people start realizing all the money that they've lost in taxes to irresponsible spending, people start adding that up. That could have been the difference between a brand new car, a vacation, home improvement, private school for their kids. It could have been a million things they could have done. People start to realize that the costs of products and services are directly related to government spending, whether or not that government spending is obvious by simply addressing the purchase price of a good or service. If the federal government creates a regulation that adds to the cost of production or compliance for the producer of a product or service, the producer of that product or service has no choice but to raise their prices. And if it's done uniformly at the federal level, there's no competition, meaning if the state of California were to levy new fees or taxes or cost of compliance or regulations on businesses in the state of California that produce widgets. What's a widget? It's a fictional product. It doesn't matter. And the state of Louisiana didn't have similar fines and fees and cost of compliance and cost of regulation or what have you. The California producers would have two choices. They can either continue to produce in the state of California and pass the cost off to consumers and be in a price competition with products produced on the same level but at a lower cost in a state like Louisiana, or they could pick up and move their facilities out of the state of California into a state like Louisiana. This all affects pricing. And if the state of California priced products produced in the state of California out of the market, in that, let's say they came up with some cockamamie formula for taxation for oranges. And there are oranges grown in California. And let's say the state of Florida did not have those costs. The price of orange juice produced with Florida oranges would be significantly lower than that of oranges produced in California. And perhaps the juice companies would prefer to purchase Florida oranges, as would consumers in supermarkets, thus affecting the ability of California growers to compete by growing oranges, which would also hurt the tax base and ultimately hurt the state. But when it's done at the federal level, prices go up for all producers, which means it goes up for all consumers, which means you have significantly less money than you would have had the government not burdened the producers of the products and services that you wish to purchase. Also, when companies are facing higher burdens on the cost of production, they tend to eliminate parts of their labor force. If it's cheaper to have a machine doing it, if it's cheaper to have it done in an automated fashion, again, if you want to address labor versus machinery from a management or consumer standpoint, go ask a club car how it feels about the caddies union. If you had a labor law that forced up the price of the labor of a caddy, and the caddies all unionized and started making demands of various golf courses, it's very, very easy to get a golf cart. All you got to do to a golf cart is plug it in at the end of the day and maybe have 2 or 3 maintenance workers who maintain the fleet of golf carts. It's that simple. If the cost of producing a round of golf becomes more than golfers are willing to spend for a round of golf, the golf course has two choices: go out of business or find a way to cut costs, eliminating caddies in favor of golf carts. This is business. It's not personal. It's just reality. Now, if one isn't even consulted as to whether or not their labor is going to be priced out of the market, it's almost a sin when government does it to them, which happens when the federal government starts passing these federal laws. And the reality is people who have lost jobs are realizing this. People who have lost money to increase costs of production due to government regulation are realizing this. And it's like eyes are opening, ears are opening, brains are starting to churn. The gears in the head are starting to go in some people's minds. And you could fall victim to class warfare. This is rich people just trying to get richer while the poor get poorer. This is people not wanting to pay a fair wage. This is un-American. You can call it whatever you want. It's still the reality. The one thing that Democrats are running against on November 2nd is reality. That's what they're running absolutely against. When we do this Restoring America rally in Great Adventure, it'll be exactly 1 month from the midterm elections. Exactly 1 month to the day to the midterm elections. And Democrats are running against reality. They can tell you that the president is trying to cut taxes. The taxes have already been cut. They were cut by the previous administration. And they've been cut for about 10 years. What the administration is talking about is a tax increase, no matter which way they spin it. If you cut middle class, if you cut taxes by class, you say, we're going to cut taxes for the middle class and we're going to nail the people who make $250 or more. While we're trying to get cap and tax, while we're trying to spend the country into oblivion with social programs and entitlement benefits, everything's going to cost more to the middle class people who got this supposed tax cut, leaving them right where they started. The reality is, and what's amazing about liberals is it's almost like religious gospel to them when you deal with facts on the ground. Fact, AIDS is spread through behavior, not a lack of federal funding. But if you talk to any liberal, any ideological liberal, they place no blame whatsoever on people who get STDs from their own behavior. Just as they simply do not believe that the government artificially inflating wages causes job loss. It also sets the people who are at the bottom right back to where they started from. If the government steps in and says, we're just going to give Americans a pay raise, and they legislate wages from a centralized location in Washington, D.C., through the bureaucracy of the National Labor Relations Board and the Secretary of Labor, Hilda Solis, and they raise the minimum wage, let's say we get crazy. It's 7 and change right now. Let's say we get crazy and we go $12 an hour. $12 an hour is the minimum wage. If 7 is good, 14 would be better. But we don't want to just double it, so we'll go to 12. At $12 an hour, everything produced by a minimum wage worker now goes up exponentially, causing a price increase, which at first is ignored by the minimum wage worker, now making $12 an hour. They're all excited. I'm making $12 an hour. This is great. You know, yesterday I was making 7 and change. I'm making 12. Until everything they buy, from gas to food to clothing, goes up to compensate for all the other workers that are now making the same inflated wage. Promised wage increases only work if you can contain wage increases to one group of employees. If you only had one union in this country, let's say you had one union and one union only, and it only operated in the automotive production sector, meaning the UAW was the only union. And the UAW had the power to control wages against the market. Well, then the only workers that would be seeing the benefit of the wage increase would be those workers, as prices would still be below the wages they're earning. And everybody would be clamoring to be a member of the UAW. And everybody would be clamoring to live in Michigan. And everybody would be clamoring to live in Detroit. We know the truth is the truth, and the opposite is the truth. 1-866-95-PATRIOT. And then the response comes, the emotional response. You want to send, what do you want? People working for $1 a day? The one thing that's always ignored, whenever the government artificially increases the cost of goods and services, is what the market value would be against the cost of living. What do you want? People earning $1 a day? Well, if the cost of living is 35 cents a day, if you can live your life for 35 cents a day, meaning everything that you spend in goods and services in a day would amount to 35 cents. Let's say gas was a penny a gallon, and a pound of ground beef was 2 pennies, and the mortgage on your home was really only 7 pennies a day. The total amount of living in a day in America was 35 cents. If you were making $1 a day, you were way ahead of that. You're way ahead of that. So in that cost of goods and services, $1 wage a day is a good living wage. To say that free market economists and free market conservatives want to turn back the clock on wages is nonsense. They want to turn back the clock on the cost of producing goods and services. If it's cheaper for everybody, wages don't need to be high to compensate. When they are artificially raised, it raises everything with them. That's just the reality. 1-866-95-PATRIOT, 1-866-95-PATRIOT.